everyone, it's Witchy Wednesday. I am here to talk a little bit about my personal practice as an astro witch. I am going to be talking about the Scorpio season and working with the god Pluto. So this is kind of a request video because I had made a video about my top 5 sort of dark or spooky themed type decks, and I had mentioned this deck, which is the Fallen Angel Oracle cards, and how this was the deck that I used when I worked with Pluto. So first of all, just a little bit about what I define as Astrocraft or astrological witchcraft, which is something that I do, which is witchcraft that's very much informed by astrology and using astrology and witchcraft as a tools for personal growth. So I practice astrology, and I use the planets. I see them both as like the astrological planets and forces, but also as the gods. Now, of course, the planet itself is it's a rock spinning in the sky. It's an actual physical thing. It's not a god, but it is a physical representation of that particular kind of archetypal energy. And if you want to personify that energy, I mean, it's already named for you. It's Pluto. It's Mercury. It's Venus, and all of the associations that come along with that. Now, of course, each planet deals with different aspects of life, and so I view them as almost like living entities. That their movements throughout the sky are influencing us here on Earth. That's the basic of astrology. And we have free will with how we choose to respond to that, of course. But there are things going on around us that we can't always control. And astrology, I think, is a wonderful tool for personal growth. It shows us where your strengths and weaknesses are. It shows you some of the opportunities that you have for you in the present, as well as some of the challenges that you have going on. So it is an ongoing conversation. As they say, the planets do not they impel, they do not compel, which basically means that, yes, if Venus is in Scorpio, people may be more intense in their reactions to their love life, but what you choose to do with that energy is completely up to you. It's just like if it's raining outside, you can take an umbrella, or you can not take an umbrella, or you can go out and jump in puddles, but how you respond to that is completely up to you, and that's how I look at astrology. So I work with the cycles of the planets. I work with the transits, that kind of thing, into my astrology. So we are going into a new moon into Scorpio on Sunday, and the sun switched into Scorpio today. So definitely into Scorpio season. And Scorpio is ruled by the planet Pluto. And Pluto is associated with death. Pluto is the god of the underworld. He's the god of death. And certainly those are themes that's very prominent in astrology. So Pluto rules things like how we deal with power structures. It's about how we deal with loss. It's the transitions that we're making in our life. And it's a very slow-moving planet. I believe it takes like 250-some years, 256, I think, to go all the way around the zodiac. So it's a very slow-moving, generational type of planet, and it represents the slow transition and changes that happen over generations. So because he's a god of the underworld, he also has a lot to do with psychology and the depths of our subconscious. So he's a very good god to work with, I find, when doing shadow work. And so I like to, during Scorpio season, do rituals and things that have to do with personal development, that have to do with psychological insights, just personal work, like mental health, personal work, and really diving deep into that psychology. And so I like to work with Pluto on that kind of stuff during the month of Scorpio. So one of the tools that I use when I work with a particular god or archetype is I have each of them has a card deck that is dedicated to them. So for him, I have the Fallen Angels Oracle. I thought it was perfect because this is very much a good one for shadow work because it's very straightforward. In a lot of ways, it tells you if there's something going on that you're not doing so great at, or if there's something you need to explore more. And so I really enjoy working with this deck for Pluto. So what I generally do is, actually this goes on throughout the year, is whenever the moon goes into the sign of Scorpio, I will pull one of these cards. And that happens about once a month. And that kind of lets me know, like, hey, this month, you need to work on this. When it comes to psychological work, this is what you need to work on. Or sometimes they give me a pat on the back and say, hey, you're doing well. And sometimes they say, girl, you gotta fix this. So I really enjoy it for that kind of stuff. The other thing that I do have associations as well with each of the astrological gods, so to speak. So for Pluto as well, the crystal that I associate with him is black tourmaline. Black, of course, is associated with Scorpio and with Pluto. And tourmaline is great because it's not the prettiest stone, but it is a very functional one, and it's one that I think every witch probably has in their toolkit because it's one that helps to repel negativity. So it is a really great one for dealing with things like the darker things in life, dealing with negativity. And it really helps you to deal with things on a very practical level as well. So Pluto is not a god that allows for spiritual bypassing, that's for sure. He's one that definitely asks you to delve deep into things and to look at some of the transitions that you're going through. So the way that I kind of use this too is I look at where Pluto is in my chart, and again, he moves very slowly. So he's been going through my 4th house, and will be going through there for quite a while. For those of you that are not familiar with astrological terminology, the 4th house has to do with home and family. So it's very much about transitions and changes over the next several years in that particular area. And sometimes those changes are not always easy, and sometimes they involve letting go and loss. And it's about accepting those things and dealing with them on a very real level, rather than trying to escape them or trying to gloss them over. Pluto does not allow for that. He is very much about dealing with things in depth and accepting things as they are. So I like to work with, like I said, this deck for that. Like I said, I do that monthly check-in, but then also when we reach Scorpio season, I'll be doing rituals dedicated to him and also to psychological development and shadow work as well, or shadow work. So I'm going to talk about how I do shadow work a little bit more in another video, but somebody had asked me about, like, oh, it's really interesting that you have decks, that you said that deck was dedicated to Pluto, and could you talk a little bit more about that? So I wanted to just come on and talk about that a little bit, and kind of what I do and how that works. But it's part of, like, I consider it like my Astrocraft, I call it. It's like witchcraft and astrology kind of mixed together. Because I believe we need to work with the cycles that we're in, just like we work with the cycles of the moon and we work with the solar cycles, through the wheel of the year. I take it broader, and I look at the transits that I'm going through in my personal life, as well as what's going on a global level for everybody. When it comes to what's going on in the sky. So I feel like this is a bit of a ramble, but I hope that this has given you a little insight, and maybe given you an idea of what you might want to do if you're interested in this kind of stuff. Next time, I think next month, I'm going to talk a little bit more about when we get into Sagittarius season. That's when I start working with Jupiter, because Jupiter is the planet in charge of the sign of Sagittarius, and that is very much, he is in charge of wealth and expansion. So very much coincides with kind of the holiday season and the abundance. So we dive deep with Scorpio and with Pluto before we come out to the festive side of Jupiter and Sagittarius. So and then I'll talk about what decks and associations I have with that. So if you have any questions, or if you find this interesting, let me know. As a reminder, if you are interested in working with me on my Patreon, we're going to be doing some of the shadow work stuff in November, and we're also going to be working with Pluto for this cycle of the moon, starting with the new moon. So if you're interested in that at all, you can click on the Patreon below. Otherwise, thanks very much for watching, and if you have any questions or comments or anything, please put down below. Like and subscribe. The engagement always helps, that's for sure. And thank you again, and as always, peace and love.